I came home for Christmas. The house was empty except for Grandma eating leftovers. A note said they spent my $10,000 loan on a family cruise, take care of her. Grandma said, "We'll fix this." I just nodded. For days later, they were begging. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. My name is Luna, and last Christmas became the year I finally learned what family really meant, because mine showed me exactly what it didn't mean. I wasn't expecting anything magical when I drove home through the snow that evening, but I also wasn't expecting that. The house I grew up in was silent. Not decorated. Not warm. Not alive the way it always was during the holidays. Just silent. The porch light flickered like it was embarrassed to be seen. I remember thinking my family must have gone out to grab groceries or pick up dinner. But the moment I pushed open the front door, my heart sank. There was only one person inside. My grandma, Nora, sitting at the kitchen table in her faded Christmas sweater, quietly eating cold leftovers straight from a plastic container. No music. No laughter. Just her tiny frame hunched over a fork. I dropped my bags and rushed toward her. "Grandma? Where is everyone?" She didn't look up. She just pointed at a piece of paper taped to the fridge. I walked over, confused, and read it out loud. We decided to take the family cruise. Used Luna's $10,000 loan. Take care of Grandma. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Not even a Merry Christmas. Just a note telling me they had spent the money I loaned them last month, money they begged me for because of emergencies on a vacation I wasn't even invited to. I stood frozen, staring at the ugly handwriting. I didn't even feel anger at first. Just disbelief. The kind that squeezes your chest because your brain can't fit the betrayal inside it. Grandma finally looked up at me. Her eyes were soft, but there was steel behind them that I'd never seen before. "We'll fix this," she said calmly, as if she had been waiting for me to come home. I just nodded. Because honestly, I didn't trust my voice not to break. I hugged her, and her body felt smaller than ever. She told me my parents had dropped her off in a rush before heading to the airport. They said they didn't want to delay their flight, she whispered. Didn't even help me inside. My throat tightened. My family wasn't perfect, but abandoning their own mother and stealing from their daughter? That was new. And it cut deeper than anything I'd felt in my life. Grandma didn't push me to talk. She warmed up some tea, sat beside me, and held my hand. We stayed like that for a while, the house cold around us, both of us hurt in different ways, but sharing the same silence. When I finally spoke, the words felt sharp. "They really took the money? $10,000. Grandma nodded slowly. "They bragged about the cruise for weeks. I didn't know how they planned on paying. Now I guess I do." Something inside me hardened. I wasn't rich. That loan was my savings. I gave it to them because my mom said Dad needed it for medical tests. She cried. She swore they'd pay back every cent by February. Turns out the only emergency was their desire to drink cocktails in the Bahamas. I didn't cry that night. I thought I would. But instead, I felt this cold, steady feeling, like the world had gone quiet and I could suddenly see everything clearly. People reveal themselves when they think they won't get caught. My family revealed everything. Over the next couple of days, I stayed with Grandma. We cooked together. We talked. She told me stories about my dad when he was young, how he used to mow lawns during the summer for extra money, how he once worked 3 jobs to afford a class trip. "He wasn't always like this," she said softly. I believed her. But that didn't erase what he did now. On the 4th day, the phone started ringing. And ringing. And ringing. At first, Grandma and I ignored it. But eventually, curiosity won, and I picked up. My mother's voice exploded through the speaker. "Luna, where's Grandma? Why is all our money frozen? We're stuck at the port. Fix it. Fix it right now." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Because in that moment, listening to her frantic voice, I realized Grandma had kept a secret from me. A very big one. One that would change everything. And one that would make them beg. Just like the note on the fridge promised. I didn't answer my mom right away. I just held the phone to my ear, listening to her spiral into panic. I could hear people yelling in the background, airport noise, maybe the cruise terminal. Someone shouted something about boarding closing soon. Someone else said, "Ma'am, your card isn't going through." Then Mom's voice snapped back at me. "Luna, are you there? Why is your grandmother's account locked? Why are our cards frozen? We can't pay for anything. Your father is losing his mind." I took a slow breath. "Mom," I finally said, "what are you talking about?" Her voice dropped into that dramatic whisper she used whenever she wanted to sound like the victim. "Don't play games with me." Grandma's bank said a fraud alert triggered because someone tried accessing her trust account. Everything is frozen until the account owner approves a verification. And apparently Grandma's not answering her phone. I almost smiled. Grandma had turned off her phone before we even made breakfast. She said she didn't want any nonsense interrupting her cinnamon rolls. At the time, I thought she meant telemarketers. Now it made sense. Mom's voice kept rising. "We need her to unlock it. We're at the port. We can't check in. We can't pay for our bags. We can't even get a hotel. We've spent everything. Luna, do something." For a moment, I felt the old instinct tug inside me, the urge to fix things, to be the responsible one, to clean up their mess. But then I remembered the cold leftovers. The empty house. The note that told me to take care of Grandma. The $10,000 they stole from me. I steadied my voice. "I think you should come home, Mom." "What?" "No. We paid for this cruise. We deserve this vacation." I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't need to." "Then you should have used your own money." There was a long stretch of silence. Then click. She hung up. Grandma was leaning against the doorway, holding her mug with both hands. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Mom and Dad are stuck. Something about the accounts being frozen." A tiny mischievous smile tugged at Grandma's lips. "Oh, that? Yes, I might have arranged a little security check." I blinked. "Grandma, how?" "Why?" She set her mug down and sat across from me. "Sweetheart, I'm old. And old people see more than everyone thinks. I knew they were taking advantage of you. I knew about the cruise, too. Your mother bragged about it until she forgot I was in the room." My jaw tightened. "They lied to me. They said it was an emergency." "It is," Grandma said gently. "Just not the kind they told you about." She explained everything in that study, no-nonsense voice she used when the truth needed to be said. Turns out, Grandma had a sizable trust fund, money specifically meant for her care, living expenses, and medical needs. Not for cruises. Not for vacations. And definitely not for my parents' impulsive spending habits. A few days before I came home, my parents tried to access it. They told the bank Grandma had given permission. She hadn't. The bank flagged it as suspicious, locked accounts connected to her trust, and alerted her immediately. That's why she was waiting for me. She needed someone she trusted to help her sort through everything. But she also wanted to see what my parents would do when they realized they couldn't use her money. I leaned back. "So the reason they're stuck is because Grandma said, every card they have is tied directly or indirectly to my trust. Once it's under review, everything connected to it freezes." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "So they can't access anything?" "Not a dime." I felt a strange relief mix with a strange guilt. "They left you here. Alone. On Christmas." Grandma reached over and squeezed my hand. "And you came home. That's what matters." That night, she told me more. About how my parents had been borrowing money from her for years. How they always promised to pay it back. How they never did. How the trust was being drained faster than anyone realized. "It wasn't your responsibility to support them," she said. "They used your kindness against you. And now, well, now they finally have to face the consequences." The phone kept ringing all evening. Sometimes Mom. Sometimes Dad. Sometimes my brother, who acted like the world owed him anything he wanted. I didn't answer. The next day, Grandma and I went to the bank together. She met with her advisor, signed a series of documents, and officially removed my parents from any access to her trust or financial information. "These protections should have been in place years ago," the advisor said. "I'm glad you came in." On our way out, Grandma squeezed my hand again. "You've always been the one who shows up, Luna. It's time they learned what that means." For the next few days, our house phone and my cell exploded with calls. My parents' perfect holiday had turned into a logistical nightmare. They were stranded, broke, and furious. But the fourth day was when everything shifted. Because that's when they finally realized something. Not only could they not access Grandma's money, they were never getting my $10,000 back either. And that was the moment the begging began. The begging didn't start with an apology. Of course not. My parents had never learned that apologies come before demands. It started with a text from my brother, Ryan. Ryan, what the hell did you do? Mom and Dad said you froze everyone's money. Fix it. Like now. I stared at the message, stunned by how predictable he was. No greeting. No concern for Grandma. Not even a Merry Christmas. Just entitlement in pure text form. Grandma, sitting beside me on the couch knitting a half-finished scarf, glanced at my screen. Oh dear, she muttered. He still writes like he thinks he's in charge. I couldn't help laughing. He's demanding I fix it. Don't, she said simply. Let them sit with their choices. But they weren't done. 10 minutes later, Dad finally called. Not yelling this time. Not angry. Just desperate. Luna, he said, voice cracking like he hadn't slept in days, we're stuck. Your mother is having panic attacks. We don't have money for a hotel. We're standing outside the port with our luggage. We can't go anywhere. My chest tightened, not out of sympathy, but out of disbelief. They had chosen this. They stole my $10,000. They abandoned Grandma. And they expected me to be the solution? I kept my voice steady. You used my money. You lied about an emergency. It was an emergency. Dad insisted. Your mother needed a break. We all did. We wanted one good Christmas. At my expense, I said quietly. Silence. A long, painful silence. Then he sighed. Look, we made a mistake. Just help us get back home. We'll fix it once we're there. Fix it. I'd heard that before. Dad, I said, Grandma told me everything. About the trust. About the money. About how you've been borrowing from her for years. His voice instantly sharpened. She told you that? Why would she? Because it's the truth, I cut him off. And because she's tired of being used. More silence. This one heavier. Just tell her to unlock the accounts, he muttered. I looked at Grandma. She looked right back at me, eyes clear and firm. No, I said. He inhaled sharply. What? No, I repeated. You don't need access to Grandma's money. You need to take responsibility for what you've done. I could hear Mom yelling in the background. Is she refusing? She can't do that. We are her family. Dad didn't defend me. He never did. He just whispered, we're cold. And stranded. And we have nowhere to go. My stomach twisted, not because I agreed with him, but because hearing your parents sound helpless is unsettling in a way you can't fully prepare for. But consequences don't care about comfort. I'm sorry, I said. I really am. But you made this choice. Not me. I hung up. The room felt strangely peaceful afterward. Grandma set her knitting aside and placed a warm hand on my knee. You did the right thing, she said. I don't feel good about it. You're not supposed to, she chuckled softly. You're not cruel, Luna. That's why they always picked you, because they knew you'd clean up their messes. This time, you didn't. The phone rang again. And again. And again. We ignored it. That evening, while we were making soup, Grandma said something that stayed with me. You know, honey, they didn't just steal your money. They stole your kindness and used it as currency. You deserve better than people who treat your generosity like an ATM. The next morning was when the pressure hit its peak. At 7:12 a.m., Mom sent a long voice message. I clicked it out of morbid curiosity. Luna, she began, theatrically sniffing like she'd been crying for hours, I'm disappointed in you. Your father and I raised you better than this. We are stranded, humiliated, and exhausted. We trusted you. And you've turned your back on us. I paused the message halfway through. Trusted me? I muttered. You stole from me. Grandma took the phone from my hand. Sweetheart, you don't need to listen to that. But I did listen. I needed to hear how far they'd go to avoid the truth. Mom ended her message with, if you don't help us today, don't bother calling us again. There it was. the manipulation, the conditional love, the weaponized guilt. But the thing about emotional blackmail is, it stops working when you finally stop caring about their approval. Later that afternoon, Dad called again. No yelling this time. No guilt. Just pure, raw desperation. "Luna," he whispered, "we're out of options. Please, just ask Grandma to unlock the account. We can't stay here." I closed my eyes. "Dad, why didn't you just tell me the truth? Why take the money? Why lie about it? Why leave Grandma alone?" He didn't have an answer. He didn't even try to find one. Instead, he said the one thing I didn't expect to hear. "If you help us, I swear I'll pay you back." For the first time in my life, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the realization that this, his begging, their panic, their desperation, was the natural consequence of years of taking without giving. They weren't victims. They were caught. And they knew it. I took a deep breath. "You'll get help," I said quietly. Dad exhaled loudly, relieved. But then I added, "Just not the way you think." I hung up, because I finally knew exactly how this revenge story was going to unfold. And trust me, they weren't ready for it. They thought help meant money. They thought it meant I'd swoop in, unfreeze accounts, unlock trust funds, and apologize for daring to stand up for myself. But the help I had planned was the kind they had avoided for years. The kind that forces the truth into daylight. By the time Dad's last call ended, Grandma was watching me with that quiet, steady expression she always had when she knew I was thinking hard. "Honey," she said softly, "you're not obligated to save them." "I know," I replied. "But I think it's time the right people stepped in." I dialed a number I'd found earlier that morning, a number Grandma had tucked into her kitchen drawer years ago, but never had the courage to call herself. It belonged to her attorney, the one who handled her trust, the one who'd warned her repeatedly that allowing my parents access, even partial access, was dangerous. He picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. Carter?" His voice was warm, professional. "How can I help you today?" "This is Luna," I said. "Mrs. Carter's granddaughter. We need to report financial misuse. And we need a full audit of Grandma's trust." Grandma nodded approvingly beside me. The attorney didn't waste time. "I've been expecting this call for years," he said. "Tell me everything." And I did. About the borrowed money. About the cruise. About the lies. About the attempts to access the trust without permission. About the emotional manipulation my parents used on both me and Grandma for years. He listened carefully. Then he said words I will never forget. "We're going to fix this. But your parents won't like how it happens." I hung up and exhaled. The first step was done. The second step happened much faster than I expected. 2 hours later, while Grandma and I were making tea, there was a firm knock on the door. She glanced at me nervously. "Expecting anyone?" "No." When I opened the door, 2 people stood on the porch. A woman in a dark coat holding a clipboard and a man wearing a county badge. "Are you Luna Carter?" the woman asked. "Yes. We're from Adult Protective Services. We received a report regarding potential financial exploitation of your grandmother." I blinked. That was fast. "We prioritize elderly financial abuse cases immediately," she said. "May we speak inside?" Grandma squeezed my arm, then stepped aside and let them enter. They spoke gently with her for nearly 40 minutes, asking questions, reviewing documents, checking bank statements, confirming details. When they finished, the woman stood up. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "based on what you've told us, we will be opening an official investigation. Your children will be contacted today." Grandma nodded, her eyes misty but relieved. "Thank you," she whispered. "I should have done this sooner." The man added, "Everything will be handled professionally. You and your granddaughter did the right thing." They left behind a stack of papers and 2 business cards. But more importantly, they left behind the moment where Grandma finally stopped being a victim. I hugged her. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she murmured. "You defended both of us." But the climax wasn't complete yet. Not until my parents learned the truth. And that moment came. 15 minutes later. My phone rang again, Mom's number flashing across the screen. I let it go to voicemail because I wasn't ready to hear her scream. Then a message came through. This time, she wasn't angry. She wasn't manipulative. She wasn't pitiful. She was terrified. "Luna," she said in a shaking voice, "someone from the county just called us. They said there's an investigation about Grandma's finances. They said it involves us. They said we could be charged." "What did you do?" I didn't respond. I just let the message sit there, like the weight of everything they'd done finally settling on their own shoulders. 5 minutes later, Dad called. And for the first time in my life, my father cried on the phone. "Luna," he whispered, voice cracking, "please. Please tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please tell them we didn't mean to hurt anyone. We just needed a break. We were stressed. We thought." "You thought Grandma's money was yours," I said. "No," he choked. "No, I swear. We just didn't think it would go this far. You used my $10,000, I said, my voice still calm. "You lied to me. You abandoned Grandma. And now you're facing the consequences. That's not my doing. That's yours." He let out a long, broken exhale. "Luna, we could lose everything." I closed my eyes. "You already lost us." Before he could reply, I added, "You're coming home. And when you get here, you're going to do something you've never done before." "What?" he asked weakly. "You're going to apologize. And you're going to return every dollar you stole." Silence. A small, defeated breath. "Okay." I ended the call slowly, almost gently. Grandma watched me from across the room. "You handled that with more grace than they deserve." I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt done. The climax wasn't about revenge. It was about truth finally catching up with them. And now that it had, the final chapter was waiting. My parents came home 2 days later. Not triumphant. Not tanned from a vacation. Not bragging about fancy dinners or ocean views. They came home exhausted, sunburned, and dragging their luggage through the snow like two people returning from war, not a canceled cruise. When they stepped onto the porch, they didn't even knock. They paused, staring at the front door of the house they'd abandoned for a well-deserved break. I watched them through the window, the two people who raised me, now standing small, hesitant, and uncertain for the first time in my life. Grandma noticed them too. She stood up, straightened her sweater, and said simply, "We're not hiding. Let them in." So I opened the door. The moment Mom saw Grandma, her face crumpled. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm so..." Grandma lifted a hand. "No, you're not going to cry your way out of this." Mom froze. Dad placed a shaky hand on the doorframe. "We came to talk." "Then talk," Grandma said, stepping aside and motioning to the living room. They entered slowly, as if the house might bite. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Mom stared at the floor. Dad kept rubbing his forehead. Finally, he cleared his throat. "We messed up." That was new. He'd never admitted that before. "We shouldn't have left you alone," he continued, turning to Grandma. "We shouldn't have lied to you, or to Luna. And we shouldn't have used your money. Or hers." Mom nodded quickly, as if apologizing faster would erase everything. "We were overwhelmed. We weren't thinking straight. We didn't mean to hurt anyone." Grandma folded her arms. "You hurt everyone." Mom's eyes glistened. "I know." Mom tried to reach for Grandma's hand, but Grandma pulled away gently. "I'm not ready for that," she said softly. Dad swallowed. "We're here to make things right." I raised an eyebrow. "That includes paying back my $10,000? Both of them nodded immediately, too quickly, like they'd practiced this moment on the plane home. "Yes," Dad said. "Every cent. We already transferred half from our emergency fund. The rest will come in January." We're sorry, Luna." I searched his face. Not for perfection. Not for absolution. Just sincerity. And for the first time, I saw it. Shaky. Weak. But real. "We'll also cooperate fully with the investigation," Dad added. "We didn't know it would come to this." Grandma straightened. "That's the point. You never think your actions will have consequences." Mom wiped her face. "We've already spoken with Adult Protective Services. We're going to sign whatever paperwork they need. They said the audit will continue." Dad looked defeated. "We're not fighting it." The room grew quiet again. Then Grandma said something that surprised even me. "I don't want you punished," she said. "I want you to learn." Mom sobbed. Dad lowered his head. "You took advantage of me for years," Grandma continued. "But the worst part wasn't the money. It was realizing you cared more about vacations than visiting me on Christmas." Mom covered her face with both hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered through tears. "I'm so sorry." Grandma didn't hug her. Not yet. But she didn't look cold either. Just tired. She turned to me and nodded gently. "Go ahead, Luna." I stepped forward, took a deep breath, and said the words I'd been carrying for years. "You don't get to use me anymore. Or Grandma. This is the boundary. Either you respect it, or you don't get to be in our lives." Dad nodded immediately. "We understand." Mom whispered, "We'll do better." I believed they wanted to. Whether they would, only time could tell. But something had changed. This time, the guilt wasn't shifting onto us. This time, the responsibility stayed exactly where it belonged. They stayed for dinner, quiet, subdued. No jokes. No bragging. No entitlement. Just a family eating together for the first time without pretending anything. When they left that night, Grandma turned to me and exhaled long and slow. "You handled that with grace," she said. I didn't feel graceful. That's because grace isn't about feeling good. It's about doing what's right. I smiled a little and leaned on her shoulder. "I'm glad you're okay." She squeezed my hand. "I am now." In the weeks that followed, the investigation continued, but my parents cooperated fully. Grandma's trust was placed under new protections. My $10,000 was repaid in full early. My parents started therapy. And, for the first time in years, they treated Grandma like a mother, not a wallet. It wasn't a perfect ending. Families rarely get those. But it was a real one. A few months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Grandma and I were sitting on the porch with tea when she nudged me and said, "You know, sweetheart, I think you saved this family." I shook my head. "No, Grandma. You did. I just stood beside you." She smiled the way only a grandmother can, full of pride and softness. "Well," she said, patting my hand, "either way, we're okay now." And we were. Because revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply reclaiming your power. And watching the people who underestimated you finally learn the lessons they avoided for far too long. And that Christmas? It wasn't the one I expected. But it became the one that changed everything. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new revenge story. See you in the next video.